Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I answer your automotive questions and sometimes butcher your names. A few things before I get started. First, I will be taking the questions from the Google Plus event. You can find that on my Google Plus page. You can find a link and you can post your questions there. If you're watching this video on YouTube, I cannot see the questions that are posted there, so unfortunately I won't be able to answer those for you. I apologize for that in advance. If I don't get to your question today, or if for whatever reason you have automotive questions outside of these videos, I'd ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. It's available to you all the time, and there's a lot of information there, including an FAQ section and a forum where you can get automotive help. So if I'm not around, that is the best place to go. One last thing, this is the 50th show, which is like way cool. So this is number 50 live show for me. It's kind of a little milestone. Also, the next show will be September 23rd. So if I miss it today, I do these every other week, 7 p.m. on Wednesday nights. You can stop and catch me then. Lastly, those of you familiar with the Fixing It Forward project, just today I started a GoFundMe for Fixing It Forward. I'm going to put a link in the description to this video. If you have an interest in donating to that, you can now do so. I've had a few people ask about it. And that would be great. I appreciate that, and thank you very much in advance. So I'm going to be talking about that a little more in the future, but we have that for today. But we're not here to talk about or solicit your money and donations. We are here to answer your automotive questions. So why don't we get started with that? And I believe I already mentioned that I sometimes butcher your names, and I apologize for that. This time the show is, the last few shows ran for an hour. This is going to be a half-hour-ish. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can, so I'm just going to boom, boom, boom. And once again, sorry if I butcher your names. Jeff Crow, I love the videos, and the GoPro was great. I'm looking at doing timing chain on my 2006 Kia Sedonia. I've got the service repair manual and think it looks reasonably straightforward, but I'm a little scared of getting too far into the engine. Is this DIY-able? I'm reasonably mechanically inclined and have done many other jobs in the van. I'm just in need of some positive reinforcement, so my wife will let me try. Ha ha ha. Do you think this is something that is easily done by following the manual? Thanks for all your videos. Jeff, I think one of the most difficult things you run into when you're doing timing belts is getting the crank pulley off. First of all, getting the bolt loose can be a challenge because as you try to turn it, the engine turns along with it. So it's kind of difficult to get that or overcome that issue. And you can use something that's called a flywheel holder is one of the best things that I can think of. It's a device that a lot of times on automatic transmissions or manual transmissions, they also have this. On the back of the engine, there is the flywheel, which has a bunch of teeth on it, which is what the starter uses to engage to turn the engine over when you first start it. There's a tool that you can get that it's not an expensive tool. It's just basically a bolt with a couple of teeth on it that basically lock that thing into place and hold the engine still so you can break the crank bolt loose. That's like one of your main hurdles, and sometimes you have to use a puller to pull the crank pulley off. You might want to consult with that manual because I'm not exactly sure what the process is on that. Was a 2006 Kia Sedonia. Hang on a minute. If that's the one I'm thinking of, you might have to drop the engine out to do it. And I'm not kidding when I say this. Some of those, the clearance is so tight that you have to drop the engine out the bottom and do the timing belt while it's out of the vehicle. You might want to look into that first. You say you've got the manual, and if it says you can do it in the car, great. But I do remember some Hyundais, you had to actually drop the engine and transmission and everything out the bottom just to gain access because there just wasn't room inside the vehicle itself. So doable, yes, but I think your most important hurdle is going to be that. Once you've got the crank pulley off, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's really just a parts replacement kind of thing. But that is the challenge that I think is the biggest stumbling block. Also, getting everything back in time is definitely important. So follow the service manual procedure on that. You can decide whether that's for you or not, but I would definitely look into whether or not on that model you have to drop the engine out the bottom in order to replace that timing belt. I remember the guys over at Hyundai having to do that on some models. John McLaughlin, he even like spelled it out for me or phonetically. Hey Eric, I want to get into motor vehicle maintenance and repair. Your shows are great and very informative. I already have basic tools, floor jacks and stands, wrenches, sockets, and some ratchets. How could I develop my skills enough to be able to work on customer vehicles? Many thanks, John McLaughlin. Okay, John, usually I don't answer questions like this. I just try to stick them to auto repair. I suggest school. And in fact, I would suggest going over and checking out my EricTheCarGuy channel. I talk a lot extensively about this, about automotive education, about working in the field, what it's like to work as a technician, all kinds of discussions about this very type of thing. And I would suggest you go there and watch some of those videos because I put a lot of information out there. But ultimately, it comes down to this. A lot of people say, I don't need no stinking automotive education. I can just go out and get a job and work on cars. You know, I got the mechanical skills, and some people have done it. They've been doing it for years. That can happen. Not to say it can't. But at the end of the day, if you're an employer, if I'm an employer looking to hire somebody, I'm looking for somebody who's made a commitment and has gone to school and has made an effort towards their education. Otherwise, you're a risk, you're a liability. So if you want to get to the point where you want to work on customers' cars, I strongly suggest that you get some form of automotive education under your belt, and also as much experience as possible, because really at the end of the day, and this goes on the side of the argument, whereas I don't need no stinking automotive education, experience is what makes you a better technician, in my opinion. So the more you do, the better you get. However, you need the backstory, you need a foundation. That foundation is an education. So strongly suggest you look into that. I'll put a link to the EricTheCarGuy channel down below so you can go and check those videos out. Like I said, extensive videos that I've done about that very type of thing. The Avenger, Evinger, whatever. Hey, Eric, I love the videos. 2006 Hyundai Tiburon GS has a slight vibration when driving at 50 and above. It's very small and doesn't move the steering wheel, but I can feel it in the steering wheel and the seat. I've had the wheels balanced, come with tires worth about $50 new. It still has plenty of tread on them. I'm not about to throw out good tires. Had an alignment, jacked up the front end, listened to the bearings with a stethoscope, sounded good. Replaced both rear sway bar end links, both making noise. Rotated the wheels multiple times, vibration never changes. It also is worth noting that it seems to come and go. The bottom brake caliper slides is frozen on all four wheels, but it doesn't vibrate when braking or pull to one side. The shop actually put on all new brakes for this car before I bought it. The car drives perfectly straight and has no other issues. It's worth saying the car was evidently in a front end rear collision in the snow. I found it at a body shop, and I found that the front bumper and hood were replaced. The exhaust was heavily damaged and needed some major bending to get it straight enough to match the mounting points. The radiator fan mounts are broke, and the condenser was junk. The car was cheap, and I drove it, and it drove straight, so I took it. But this very slight vibration is starting to bug me. I only noticed it about a month after buying it, but I'm sure it was doing it before. Also, heat stops working when the car is idling, even if warm, but once you start moving, it blows out toasty heat again. Some say a bubble in the heater core, some say a thermostat. What do you think? Thanks in advance. Okay, I'm going to point this out. Now, earlier I said on the website, I have resources there to help you if you have automotive questions. Both of these questions are addressed over on the FAQ page of my website. I've written extensively about vehicle vibrations and also intermittent heat. As far as your vibration is concerned, suspension parts have really nothing to do with it. It's things that rotate that cause vibrations. You talk about an intermittent vibration. Yes, the vehicle has been in a collision, and that's not necessarily a good thing. That's sort of counting against you. But what you're describing sounds very similar to a problem with an inner CV joint, an axle problem causing that vibration. And the intermittent nature of it is what comes to mind and what sort of trips that off in my mind. So I'd be checking the inner CV joints. I lift up on them, feel whichever one is loose. In fact, just last week, I fixed my friend's van that was having a similar problem. I replaced an axle. His vibration is gone. But it's finding which axle is the difficult part. As far as the heat, that's classic air in the cooling system. First thing you do when you have a problem like that is bleed the air from a cooling system. I have a video on that. And once again, there's also that video along with an explanation of situations like this over on my website, in the FAQ section. So check for air in the cooling system and check for looseness in the axles. Matt Bono, hey Eric, I recently purchased a 2008 Prius base with 142,000 miles on it. Very clean and pretty complete Carfax report, but no record of a tune-up or spark plug replacement. My question is it possible to tell how many miles the plugs have on them, or if they are factory originals by visual inspection? I'm going on a road trip soon, and I want to replace them if they are old. Thanks in advance. Congrats on the 50th show. Hey, thanks for that, Matt. Thanks for noticing. Okay, I would say, especially someone who's inexperienced is not really going to say how many miles are on the plugs. And I'm also going to say even somebody with experience is not going to be able to say how many miles are on the plugs. But this is what you look for. A lot of plugs these days that go into engines are high mileage plugs. They're like 100,000 mile plugs. Platinum or iridium type plugs is usually what they run, and they run for 100,000 miles without issue. And they're also quite expensive as a result. So it's like buying 3 sets of plugs once, but you just put them in once and you deal with them once. If you have a doubt, put them in. And put in what the manufacturer says, because other than that, it's probably going to eat at the back of your mind, wondering the whole time if something's going to go wrong. So if you have a doubt and you have a question, I say just go ahead and do it, and that way you know from that moment on. But check the service interval for your vehicle and see when they're scheduled to be changed. Also, make sure you put the correct plug in your vehicle, because especially these days, manufacturers are very specific about the plugs being used. So make sure you use the correct brand, type, and heat range for your application. Will McAdams. Hi, Eric. Help! LOL. I have a question for you. A 1997 Accord 2.2 non-VTEC that I just replaced the engine in. I have hooked everything up and double-checked all the hoses. I have no leaks, vacuum or otherwise. I believe I have everything as it should be, timing marks and all are lined up. I started and it's running rough. I give it gas, it jerks, backfires sometimes. Just no power tack, want to work, just a lot of things wrong. Now for the weird part. I plug in my scan tool to check live data, and all of a sudden it smooths out. Everything works as it should, and it sounds great. I unplug it and it goes back to flipping out. Any ideas? I have a feeling that you might say, but just wanted to get your opinion. Okay, you plug in the scan tool and it runs fine. Almost sounds like a grounding issue, because when you're plugging in the scan tool, perhaps you're creating a ground path that wasn't there before. And if the ECU isn't grounded properly, then it won't be able to function properly. Electronics speak in the language of voltage. And if they don't have the proper voltage, things don't work correctly. You just replace the engine though. You could have plugged something in incorrectly, forgot to hook something up. I would double, triple check. I mean, putting in an engine, there's a lot of stuff that gets connected and disconnected. You have to make sure that you get everything back the way it was in order for it to run correctly. I'd be looking around, particularly engine grounds, that type of thing. Make sure that those are all connected and working correctly. Here's something that can happen on Accords sometimes, and a lot of people come to me with this issue, and I'm trying to think what 2 plugs, but they're right around the throttle body. One I think is the auto air control valve, and the other is like the TPS sensor. And no, maybe it's not TPS. TPS is 3 plug. There's like a temperature sensor and something that both have the same type of plug on the harness. And when you get up around the intake manifold, you can actually switch the 2. I do know this. One plug, I believe, is gray and the other plug is green. And you match the colors together. So green plug goes to green connector, gray plug goes to gray connector. If you mix them up, the computer will get very confused, and there are all kinds of issues that get reported with this. So anytime somebody has an engine out or something like that, I tell them to check for that. It is something that can happen because there's just enough length on that harness to where it will plug in and click, but the colors are different. So check those colors and make sure they're correct. But also check those engine grounds and make sure there's nothing happening there. It's rare for Hondas to have an ECU problem unless there was some external something. Somebody might have surged it or caused a problem with it, but it is very rare for Hondas to have a problem with the ECUs. Usually there's some outside force that caused something. So if you sparked it, if you did something that could possibly damage the computer, but the fact that it runs well when you plug in a scan tool, that sort of says to me, okay, maybe there's a grounding issue, because remember, computers speak in the language of voltage. And if they're not getting the proper voltage, then they won't be able to understand anything. John Tucky, hey Eric, has a 2006 Miata, and when the engine is running, shifting to second is very difficult in cold weather, maybe mid to high 60s. After a couple of minutes of driving, the shift to second is not as difficult. Hot, warm weather, it is still notchy, but not nearly as hard to shift. I read it could be second gear synchro wearing, or possibly a need for different transmission fluid. Genuine Ford XT-M5-QS full synthetic seems to possess magical properties for Miatas. Do you have a different test? Should I even bother with the transmission fluid change? Thanks. Once again, this is something that I cover in the FAQ section of my website. This is classic transmission fluid issue. If it was a synchro, it would happen all the time. So even when it warmed up, you'd still have the same problem, and it usually grinds. Synchros are usually grinding going into a particular gear. The fact that it's temperature related almost always is going to be fluid. So I would suggest using Ford's magic fluid and trying it in there and give it a little bit of time for that stuff to work itself through. And I wager that that will probably solve your shifting problem. Andy Pittman. Hey, Eric, I'm back again with my 2000 tipper on. I've been having issues for a few months where I'll be driving for about 45 or so minutes, doing about 45, 50, and the RPMs will go from 2,500 to 3,500 and then drop back down, as if the overdrive is being turned off and the light on the dash isn't turning on, and I can hear the engine rev up too. I'll do that a few times and jump back up to say 3,500 while driving at that speed, and then overdrive doesn't turn on. If I pull over and turn my car off and restart it, it's fine for a little while until it does it again. Sometimes it throws a check engine light, but when I went to have the codes read, the scan tools wouldn't connect to my car. I've also checked the fluid for transmission, and it seems fine. I wonder if you ever experienced this problem or had an idea what could cause this. Thanks. Oh, by the way, it's an automatic. Forgot to mention that. Okay. It's odd that the scan tool won't connect to it. And if it's just your scan tool that won't connect to it, and maybe the fact that you don't possess a scan tool that's able to read transmission codes. If this is indeed a transmission problem, as basically by your description it sort of seems that way, it should set a code specific to the transmission, and not all scan tools will read transmission codes for all vehicles. You may have to get a better scan tool or find somebody that has a tool that's capable of reading transmission codes in order to pull that code. That may be what you're up against there. But that's where you should start. I'm not going to dare speculate on what the actual issue is, because it could be an electronic problem. It could be an internal mechanical failure with the transmission. But really, it all starts with that code. The fact that you have a check engine light on means something is stored, or something should be stored to indicate the system that's affected, that's giving you those symptoms. So that's what I would do. I'd be seeking out another tester that could possibly read those codes. Ralphina Restanio. Hey, Eric, I have a problem with my 97 Maxima. I've got a P0500 code speed sensor malfunction. The speed sensor would work, then drop to 0 when driving intermittently. I hooked up a scanner, and the scanner reads 0 when the speedometer reads 0 while I'm driving. I changed the speed sensor, and it still does the same thing. I'm told the head unit and the TCM are known to go bad, and I just don't want to put out unnecessary money for a TCM if it's just a speedometer. Hope you can help, and thank you. To be honest, without looking at it for myself, it's very difficult to say exactly what the issue is. Some vehicles the computer takes the speedometer reading from the speedometer instead of directly from the speed sensor. Some of them do it like that. I'm not sure. Maybe the Maxima does it like that. I actually took some time and looked this up for this particular vehicle, and you are correct. The two things that come up most often for this are the speedo head and the wiring harness. So it still could be a problem in the wiring harness that's causing this. So it may not be the speed sensor itself. It could be a problem between the wiring and the computer, or the wiring and the dash, depending upon how it's wired up. So if you're looking to save money and you're looking to find out for sure what the issue is, you need to find out what wires, or where those wires terminate, and find out if that signal is getting to where it needs to be, either into the dash or into the computer. Once you have that information, you'll know for sure if it's a problem with the wiring or not. And that's unfortunately the only way you're going to know for sure if it's a wiring problem, or if it's a hardware failure. You have to basically follow the trail and figure out where it leads you. So I wish you luck with that. John N. That was nice. John M. Hey, Eric, you are the man. Thank you. I'm back with a 86 Chevy G10 van. I just changed the power steering box because it was leaking and used the original hoses. Everything is almost perfect. No leaks, clean driveway, etc. I noticed that at low RPMs in gear, or when I'm stopped, when I turn the wheel, the steering wheel will shudder, and it sounds like it's stressing something. This doesn't happen before I change the power steering box. The fluid is full. The idle speed is a little bit low on the engine, though, which I plan to raise it soon. What do you think is responsible for this? Thanks very much. Stay dirty. Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is you obviously had to change the fluid when you put the steering box on there. If you didn't get the right fluid in there and you mixed it with some of the other fluid that was in there, mixing fluids is not necessarily a good thing. So it could be a fluid issue. So you want to make sure you use the correct fluid. And if you did not use the fluid that's called for by the vehicle, then you need to go in there and take off the return hose, go into the power steering reservoir and stick that into some suitable container, run the engine. You can empty out all the fluid that way. It only takes a couple seconds. Once you've done that, fill it up with the correct fluid and try it. If you still have an issue, it could be your new steering box. And given that I'm pretty sure it was remanufactured, I'm getting into dangerous waters here, but there is an adjustment on the worm gear of a steering box of that type, and that's what that nut and that little slotted screw thing is on top of that. That's the adjustment for the worm gear. If that adjustment is too tight, you can get the problem that you're talking about. To address that, you have to make sure that the wheels are pointed dead straight forward when you do it. You loosen the nut, you tighten the screw down until it bottoms out, and you back it off, I believe 1.5 turns, and then you tighten the lock nut down again. That sets the preload on the worm gear inside that steering box. I would check the fluid first. Last resort would be that. However, if it wasn't that long ago, you replaced that steering box and you replaced the fluid and you still have that issue, I might take it back to where I got that steering box. And I know it sucks to have to take it out again and everything, but if you go in and you make that adjustment, you very likely will void any warranty that you might have with that steering box. So weigh your options and decide what to do from there. All right, Joe Sperazza. I have a Bank 1 System 2 lean on a 1998 Tahoe 5.7 Vortec engine. Can you tell me what to do, please? Okay, a lean code usually means that you're getting too much air or not enough fuel. So that's what you're looking for. Number one cause of lean codes in my experience is vacuum leaks. I've done a video on looking for vacuum leaks. I'll post a link to that down in the description. So look for vacuum leaks as the first thing I would do. Also, exhaust leaks that are near O2 sensors can fool O2 sensors into thinking that they're lean. So if you've got any exhaust leaks, say in a manifold or something like that, or someplace near the O2 sensor, be aware of that. Down at the bottom of the list is the actual O2 sensor itself, but I would look for those other issues first. So that's where I would start. Look for vacuum leaks, look for exhaust leaks, and then take things from there. All right, Brian Houlihan. Hey, Eric, love the show. I have a 1993 Acura Integra LS with a V1A-A1 engine. My question is if you would know why, at idle, it vibrates really bad. I've watched all your videos on the FITV and IAC valve. I replaced the IAC, adjusted the FITV, changed spark plugs, wires, distributor cap, replaced all motor mounts, not because of this, but because they were ripped, adjusted the idle to 600 RPM without IAC plugged in, because previous owner tampered with the idle screw and it still vibrates really bad at idle. While pressing on the gas, it smooths out. Also, don't know if this may be relevant, but I checked the timing. It was 2 degrees off. I jumped the check engine light plug and adjusted it to 0 degrees on the nose. When I took out the jumper wire, it jumped back up 2 degrees advanced and kept doing that. Any answer would be greatly appreciated, and thanks for your time. Oh yeah, compression on all cylinders is 180, 185, 180, 178. Okay, Brian, another thing that is covered over at my website in the FAQ pages, I've written extensively about Honda idle issues. FITVs do not cause rough idles. They can cause a high idle. And if they're misadjusted, your cold start will not be correct. I almost wish I'd put that in that video, because a lot of people just took that to heart, and if they had an idle problem, they just wanted adjusting the FITV. The only time to adjust the FITV is if you've got a really fast idle or a surging idle. That can possibly help with that issue, because it sort of acts like a vacuum leak. But that's not where you go first. One thing you didn't mention was valve adjustment. And I don't know if that would cause like the kind of vibration you're talking about, but a loose timing belt on that engine sure can. That's a dual overhead cam engine. When the timing belts get loose, the cams do what I call chunking. So as it rotates, the cam lobes are pushed back in the opposite direction by the valve springs every time they go past the apex. So every time it does that, it sort of is forced in the another direction, and it rapidly accelerates. And it does this on both cams. So instead of the cams spinning smoothly, they do what I call chunking as they go around. And that engine is very famous for the timing belt loosening up. It's a manual adjustment that you have to do. So take the valve cover off and poke the top of the timing belt. You may have to rotate the engine a little bit, because sometimes it'll appear tight and other times it'll appear loose. So as you rotate the engine, you'll see that timing belt get tight or loose. If you see it loose, you got to tighten up that timing belt. And if it's old, you might as well replace it. There's a video on my website about replacing the timing belt on that engine. Once again, there's also more information on Honda idle issues, especially in particular Honda rough idles. So you might want to go through that list. You've already gone through most of it, and well done with your plugging in, unplugging things, and setting the idle correctly and setting the timing correctly. But the reason why the timing changes when you unplug that connector is because the computer controls the timing. That's why you have to do that when you set base timing. And it's not set to 0. I believe it's set to 16 degrees. So you may have the timing off to start with. So make sure you've got that correct. And there's a procedure to follow. In fact, the 93 Integra is very similar to the timing video that I did where I showed plugging in that connector. And I believe it's actually 16 degrees, not 0 degrees where you set it. But check the service manual, or that may be printed on the underhood sticker. So start with those things. And also, you can't rule out vacuum leaks ever. So always check for vacuum leaks and make sure you don't have any of those, because those can upset the idle and cause it to have a vibration like you described. But more information on that FAQ page. There'll be links in the description to that stuff as well. Deepak Nayak, I believe I've seen you here several times. Hey, Eric, I hope you're good. My car speedometer was not working. Replaced the speed sensor and it's working fine now, but I'm noticing the steering has become stiff after the replacement of the speed sensor. It's an EPS. Do I have to reset the ECU or something? How's the speed sensor relating to steering stiffness? Kindly advise. But okay, so you didn't give me what type of vehicle this is, but yes, electronic power steering, that's the EPS. Does rely on the speed sensor as far as assist. So it's only going to assist when you're driving slowly. When you're driving down the road at speed, you no longer need power steering. So power steering is normally cut at that time. So in order to maintain efficiency, the only time you're ever getting power steering is when you're at slow speeds. How does the computer know that? Through the speed sensor. So if you replace the speed sensor and now you've got this issue, I would definitely look into, there may be a reset procedure with it or something like that, a relearn procedure that must be followed. I'm not exactly sure what vehicle you have here, but I would look up the service procedure for replacing the speed sensor on your vehicle as far as any resets or anything like that that may be required. Alfie Dunn, A up, Eric. Please, can you give some general advice regarding timing belt replacement? A timing belt video on a transverse engine would be much welcomed in addition to your video library, especially for us UK viewers. Hello, UK. Thanks. I do have timing belt videos. Those are for sale on my website, and I have got a Subaru one that's out there. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, the most difficult thing is dealing with the crank bolt and getting the crank pulley off. Once you get past that, it's really pretty straightforward. I'll work on getting some more videos on that type of thing. For now, I know I have that Subaru timing belt, although that's not my favorite one. It's still fun to watch, though. I played around with the GoPro with that. But I'm actually maybe looking at something on a Toyota in the not too distant future. Cameraman Brian's Toyota is in need of a timing belt, but it's not transversely mounted. So that may not help you. But once again, it's the crank bolt and the crank pulley. Getting those things off is often what holds people up as far as that goes. And also getting everything back in time. Sometimes there's several timing belts. Really depends on the model. So the timing belts are very specific to the model that you're working on for the most part. But general tips, that's what I can offer you. And I hope that helps. And hello again, UK. Chris Baker. Hi, Eric. Been watching your videos for some time. Very useful. Got a Reliant Schmidtar? I don't know what that is. 1974, and I'm restoring and need advice on bleeding brakes. Managed to get the pedal, then tried it again the next day, and no good. Got all the air and have to pump. Got all the air out, but have to pump them to get them to work. Has discs in front and drums in the rear. Thanks, Chris in the UK. Okay, Chris, what you're describing sounds like a leak. And given that it's a 1974, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. And if you're scratching your head trying to figure out where that leak might be, pull the drums off and check the wheel cylinders. The little rubber boots on the wheel cylinders, pull them back and see if you see fluid dripping out. If you do, replace the wheel cylinders and then try bleeding again. If you cannot find any external leaks in that way, try holding your foot on the brake pedal just lightly. Don't push on it hard, just hold it lightly. If your foot slowly sinks to the floor, then that's a master cylinder problem. Replace the master cylinder and bleed the brakes and try that again. I've got a video out there on master cylinder replacement that you might find helpful. The main thing is to bench bleed it before you put it on the car. That saves you a whole lot of time as far as bleeding later on down the road. But light pressure on the brake pedal, if the brake pedal sinks to the floor, it's very likely a master cylinder problem. But check for external leaks first. In particular with something like that that's that old, check the wheel cylinders and see if they're okay. Also, check the calipers just for the heck of it. That should be fairly obvious. They'll be pretty wet if the calipers are leaking. But the wheel cylinders can be a little bit more tricky. As I said, you have to pull back the boot sometimes to find that fluid that may seep out. Okay, we are getting into overtime, but I'm going to keep on rolling here. Frank C. Hi, Eric. Been a subscriber to your YouTube since you taught me how to replace brake pads. Thank you for that. Thanks. My wife's 2007 Ford Fusion is making front end noise for a while now. Worse when turning. I thought wheel bearing until I watched your video and listened to the noise while the car was on the jack. It sounded like a continuous grinding, but it sounds more like a helicopter. Had her take it back to get the tires checked for balance and defects, but they said all was good. Changed the front brake pads, found no unusual wear. I did not get the rotors cut as the pads were not really in need of changing and didn't appear to be wearing unevenly. Any suggestions would be appreciated. Also, something that is covered in the FAQ section of my website on noises. This sounds like CV joint problem. You may not have a boot that's split open or grease that's spraying everywhere. You would have noticed that when changing the brakes. I'm fairly certain of it. But what you describe is almost classic CV joint problem, and it usually happens on turns. That tends to stress a CV joint. So if you're making a left turn, it's usually the right joint. If you're making a right turn, it's the left joint. So it's opposite of the way you're turning that it usually is. So if you're turning in one particular direction and you hear the noise more than the other, that's what I would look for. Outside of that, sometimes debris can get lodged in the brake assembly and cause strange noises. It could be rust, it could be just road debris, stuff like that. Something else to check for. Best way to check for that is to disassemble the brakes themselves, look around, see if everything works. While you're there, you might as well service them, clean and lubricate everything, put it back together. Post a link in the description to a video on that if you haven't seen it already. And that could alleviate the problem. So the thing that comes to mind as you're talking is a CV joint issue. John Cheeks. Love the vids. My dad has a 95 Ford F-150 XL 6-cylinder. Automatic training truck starts most of the time. Sometimes you have to cycle the key on and off for a few times before trying to crank it. It will run just fine and will pull a 500-pound trailer when it's stone cold without a hiccup. You can mat the pedal and it takes off like a scalded dog. But when it starts warming up, I can't keep it self-idling, and anything past the first line on the gauge, it dies out until it cools back off. When you press the accelerator, it warms up and acts like it's running out of gas. The warmer it gets, the worse it gets. My father thinks it's the fuel pump wearing out, and the fact it does this only when warm. I can hear the pump turn on and off when the key is turned. Leads me to believe a sensor is making its stick full rich. John, I'm in your camp. In fact, I would be checking the coolant temperature sensor. The coolant temperature sensor helps dictate fuel mixture based on engine temperature. So if you're having a problem with temperature that's temperature related and it runs fine otherwise, that says to me that most of the other systems like spark plugs and all that other kind of stuff are functioning well. And as you point out, it could be a sensor that's causing it to read incorrectly. Now, a 95, it's going to be a little bit difficult because it's not OBD2. What you'll have to do is you'll have to take a reading directly at the sensor itself, and you have to find the specification for it. I usually take a couple of straight pins and stick it in the back of the wires. Or actually with that, you can just unplug the connector altogether and take your readings directly from there. Also, you might even try unplugging the sensor. Just unplug the sensor and try it and see if you have a problem, because that'll put it into what's called limp-in mode. So if it runs and you don't have the same problem with the sensor unplugged, but it begins to run okay, then I would replace that sensor. Those older vehicles like that weren't often good at setting check engine lights for such things because it sees a reading. It may not be a correct reading, but it sees a reading. So therefore, it's not quote unquote smart enough to say, hey, this reading isn't quite right based on the other parameters that I'm seeing over here. So they're kind of dumb systems. OBD2, things got a bit smarter, and we're able to pick up on things and give you check engine lights for that stuff. But I would be looking to the coolant temp sensor for that particular issue. Sunny C, hi Eric, I've got a Vauxhall Astra 1.4 2004. The problem I'm having is that when I start off, after 2 to 3 hours when I'm accelerating or hardly moving, or after a while 5 to 10 minutes, it becomes all right. I just had the O2 sensor changed a couple of days ago, but I'm still having this problem. When the mechanic put in the diagnosis, the only code was for the lambda sensor. What could it be, mate? Okay, the problem I'm having is when I start it, say after 2 or 3 hours when I'm accelerating, it's hardly moving, but after 5 to 10 minutes, it becomes all right. You could have a similar issue to what I just described with a coolant temperature sensor, but it's amazing that it hasn't set a code. You said the O2 sensor was changed. Said the only code was for the lambda sensor, which is also an O2 sensor. I'm a little confused on this. Might need a bit more information, like sort of what the computer is seeing as far as short and long-term fuel trims, to see if it's adding fuel or subtracting fuel. If you look at the SFT and LFT, you want those numbers to be close to 0. If they go positive, it means it's adding fuel. If they go negative, it means it's taking fuel away. If it's taking fuel away, it sees a rich condition. If it's adding fuel, it sees a lean condition. And if it sees a lean condition, it could possibly be a vacuum leak, or as I spoke about earlier, an exhaust leak near the O2 sensor can cause those things to be upset. And I'm afraid I just don't quite have enough information on that one to really say one way or the other what you're looking at. I'm going to try to answer a few more here. Jacob McCullum, hey Eric, I have a 2003 Honda Odyssey with intermittent cruise control problems. The fuses all are fine, and the little LED comes on when the cruise system is turned on, but the cruise control will not engage. The problem used to occur randomly and even while I was driving down the highway, but now the cruise control never engages. I recently replaced the brake light switch, which was bad, and that didn't fix the problem. Hope you've seen this problem before, given that you have an old Odyssey yourself, and thanks for your help. Your videos helped me fix my sliding door in the past. Cool. I'm glad to hear that. I always like hearing how my work actually helps people. That's, like, for me, one of the coolest things ever. Okay, the most common problem is that brake light switch, which you've already replaced, and that usually causes the cruise not to activate. Outside of that, could be speed sensor related, could be a lot of things. There's a lot of things involved with that system, and you basically have to do some kind of breakdown on it. I don't have a magic bullet for you here, and I'm sorry. But the main thing that causes issues that I see are problems with the brake light switch, because, as you know, if you've got the cruise active and you step on the brakes, it's supposed to deactivate the cruise control. That's the whole reason why it's connected into the circuit. So if you have a problem with the brake light switch, it'll never activate because it's not sure whether or not you're on the brakes. Outside of that, the system is pretty straightforward. And usually if there's a problem with the main system, that green light won't come on. So you got to turn it on. It just won't come on if there's a problem with the main system. So I'm a little... it's going to require maybe a scan tool, some diagnosis to get into that a little bit deeper. And I apologize for not having more information for you on that. But truthfully, I don't see a whole lot of cruise control problems on those vehicles or just on Hondas in general outside of the brake light switch. It's usually that, or maybe something's going on with the cable. You might check the cables, make sure they're all connected correctly. If you've had the throttle body off or anything like that, maybe the cable has too much slack in it, it's not able to activate correctly. So look for things that other people might have done is what you might start with, including yourself. Never rule yourself out as a possible cause of a problem. I know this from experience, so don't feel bad. We've all been there. Sarath HP, hello sir. I've seen your video on Jumpstart. What if I read this one earlier, and I'm not sure if I can answer it. It's talking about spark plugs and starting cars, and I don't think I can answer that, but you might check out the electrical FAQ section on my website that could help better explain those types of things. Okay, I'm going to make this one the last one. Mike D. Miranda. First off, longtime fan and subscriber. Love all your videos. I've watched the evolution of ETCG since the beginning. Keep it up, brother. My wife has a 2007 Nissan Armada SE 5.6-liter V8. The vehicle has 123,000 miles, and I performed all of the 100,000-mile recommended services around 103,000 miles. Lately, the idle is surging only when the throttle is closed and only decreases. It doesn't surge upward. I know not the tranny because this happens in park as well as low speed moving forward and backward. I have a feeling it's the idle air control valve, but for this vehicle, they're expensive. Yes, things for that vehicle are expensive. Welcome to SUV ownership. Any tips, tricks on trying to clean it before I have to spend $400 on a new one? Is it possible the surge is caused by something else? No hesitation during acceleration. Please tell me what you think. Stay dirty PS. Can't wait for the vids on the Mustang. Yes, I pulled the engine on the Mustang. I have a video. I have a rough cut done, and if I can possibly get it done this weekend, I'll have it out for you in a couple of weeks. But that was fun, yes. The Mustang has run for the last time. Speaking to your problem, it does sound idle air control valve-ish. Sometimes it will set a code, but the fact that you don't have code set saying that there's something lean or something like that says that that might be an issue. The high-tech test that I use is I take the handle of a screwdriver while the engine is running and while it's exhibiting the issue, and I tap on the idle air control valve. If the condition changes, then I can reasonably assume that the idle air control valve is at fault. That's the super scientific test that I use. in cases of idle air control valves. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what you described does sound similar to that. It does sound like something that's not able to find a good idle. So I hope that's helpful to you. You know what? Maybe we'll just surprise somebody. And yeah. That's not really a question. That's a statement. Okay. Carol Hornsby has a 98 Crown Vic. Her ABS light was on and went into a full skid and crashed into a medium. Very sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay. I pushed the rim and turning ring and tire on the driver's side. I have a full spare now. What should I have checked underneath? I am hearing more noise from the lower control arm than usual. Thanks for any advice. Carol, it just so happens I did a video on vehicle inspection after a collision, very similar to what you experienced here. And a lot of times there's parts that are bent that you cannot necessarily see. So there may be something bent or coming into contact with something that you can't see. And sometimes the only way to see those things is on an alignment rack. So what you might consider is taking it in for an alignment and have them sort of tell you what those angles are if something is way out. And if something is way out and unable to be adjusted, that may point to the bent part that is causing a problem. As far as things rubbing, you might have to go under there and physically lift the vehicle up and physically turn tires and things and listen for the noise to see if you can duplicate it that way. But I'm glad you're okay. I think that's the important part. But anyway, I'm going to draw this to a close. We did go over by a good 10 minutes, so try to give you value here at Eric the Car Guy. Once again, if I did not get to your question, I apologize. I will be having another show on the 23rd, so if I didn't get to you in this show, we can do it then. Also, as I mentioned earlier, EricTheCarGuy.com is always available. And in fact, several of the questions, as I pointed out here, could be answered in the FAQ section, so you don't have to sign up for anything. You just pretty much go, to the FAQ page, and you may find answers. Those articles have videos that pertain to a lot of these questions and also text, and I did everything I could to try to give you detailed information on how to deal with a lot of the issues that I get asked about, such as what we covered here tonight. Outside of that, I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, also Instagram. Links down below to a whole bunch of stuff. So if you have further questions, check down there. But give me a few minutes to put that together for you, because I need to do that now. It is a live show. Anyway, now that we've covered all that, I want to once again thank you for watching. Remember the GoFundMe for Fixing It Forward. If you want to donate to that, I thank you in advance if you do. Outside of that, close each of my videos, including these live shows, with be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I will see you next time.